Për të folur më shumë mbi këtë raport të dalë nga GRECO, institucioni që mbledh vendet antare kundër korrupsionit, do të bëj tani një bisedë drejtpërdrejt me autorin e raportit për Shqipërinë. Mr. Stefan Leyenberger, thank you very much for joining us and giving this interview to Euronews Albania.
Thank you for inviting me.
Can you walk us through the methodology you have followed in order to prepare this report? You are the author, and what are the standards that you compare when it comes to Albania's corruption and transparency from the institutions?
Actually, we are here in the fifth round of evaluation by the Group of States Against Corruption, the so-called GRECO, and the topics which have been chosen for this round concerned the ministers, the persons with top executive functions, their political advisors, and also the police. And then to prepare this report, GRECO has drafted a questionnaire, including a lot of elements for evaluating to what extent the framework existing for preventing and then fighting corruptions among the ministers, their political advisors, and the police, to see to what extent the legal framework corresponds to what GRECO expects for preventing and fighting corruption. And then the Albanian authorities have replied to a questionnaire. We have had a lot of discussions on this, and a team composed of experts from GRECO, from evaluators from GRECO, went to Tirana to meet with the main institutions, discuss with them, and on the basis of all this, the report has been drafted.
Mr. Leyenberger, but what is your assessment on the level of corruption of the institutions you mentioned, and also how are we doing compared to the previous report? This is the fifth, but consider the previous ones. Is Albania improving or deteriorating in terms of fighting corruption?
Actually, it's quite difficult to compare from one round to another because the topics which are studied are not the same. Here we are for the first time studying really the fight against corruption among the ministers, their advisors, and the police. But we can say that as far as these topics are concerned, the legal framework is in place. However, it has been assessed overly complex, and we would recommend to Albania to simplify their system and mainly I insist on this, to implement it concretely in the day-to-day life of these institutions.
That's a very good point that I would like to stress a little bit more. So you say the legal framework is there, so we're lacking implementation, or we need improvements in the legislation?
Actually, the legislation is there, and that's a positive point, although this legislation could be simpler. It's, to our assessment, overly complex. There are too many norms in too many different texts. Maybe it would be useful to have them together, to bring them together in a single text, which would be easier for all the stakeholders to apply them concretely. But the main problem is not so much the legal framework, which exists once again, but mainly its practical implementation.
And how about the will from the official representatives to implement it, rather than just the legal framework that is there? It does exist.
Actually, the overall feeling of the evaluation team is that this will is improving. We can say it goes towards the right direction because there is more and more awareness about the need to fight corruption, to prevent corruption first of all, and then to fight it when necessary. This will is there. It is a political will, and we can feel it. But then from this will, there is a real need to go more into a day-to-day application of the framework. It is to say that all the stakeholders individual ministers, individual political advisors, police officers must really be fully conscious of all their duties vis-à-vis the prevention of corruption. They must be better trained, they must be better oriented, and they must then apply concretely all the measures which exist to reinforce, to strengthen their integrity and to prevent them from being corrupted.
Mr. Lamberg, you have asked the government to publish the political advisors and the job descriptions. What's your concern on this regard?
I think the idea, the notion of transparency is a key notion when fighting and preventing and fighting corruption. And obviously everybody knows the ministers and they know what they are supposed to do, but the public doesn't know really their political advisors, and they must really be able to know what these advisors are doing, what are their fields of competence, so that they can also assess whether when the advisor are acting, whether they are acting within the framework of their competence or within another framework, which is not then so advisable. So this is really an issue of transparency and also of trust of the general public into these institutions.
Did you get any reply from the government why they don't publish their political advisors and their job descriptions?
I think for time being that has not been thought like that, but we do hope that with the recommendation made by GRECO in their report, they will soon change this practice. This is not so difficult to be done. Actually, the advisors are known. Their names are given usually on the websites of the ministries. What is important is just to specify what are their specific competencies so that the general public can know it.
There is another recommendation that caught my attention, the fact that you mentioned the ethical code of ministers, and you recommend to change there something in terms of transparency, I guess. Do you have any concerns regarding inappropriate contacts of the ministers?
Yes, actually, the ministerial code exists, and it contains some good measures. I think it's a positive legal framework, but with the team of evaluators, we had really the feeling that this code was not very well known by all the stakeholders and not really applied. When we met with all the institutions in Tirana, none of them mentioned the existence of this code. Although this code really, I insist, includes the good measures to help preventing corruption. So we are really wondering whether this code is properly applied, and strongly encourage the Albanian authorities to use this very interesting and very valuable tool.
Mr. Lamberg, let me ask you a difficult question. If I were to ask you to put from 1 to 10, what's the performance of the government in terms of fighting corruption and being transparent, what would you say? What's the level?
Actually, that's indeed a difficult question, because that's not the
way
objective.
you measure it, yeah.
What I can say is that the things are moving into the right direction. That's obvious. But there is still a lot to be done, once again, for the practical implementation. We really have the feeling that the people in Albania do not trust so much this system, because, once again, they do not have enough proofs that the system functions in practice. And that's really something important. The Albanian institutions must be cautious that they have a system, which is already a good point, but they really must work hard so that this system is implemented, and not only from time to time, but in the everyday life of their institutions.
Trust institutions, not people. That's what you stress.
I mean, this is really for the people who are running the institutions to do this effort.
Also, you talk in the report about the high inspectorate of declaration and audit of assets. You mentioned them and their work. What is the evaluation on this inspectorate, and should it be more done jointly through the prosecutor office and the Hidachi? What's your assessment?
The idea of the report is really to support Hidachi. We know that they are doing a huge work. Maybe they could even be more staffed and get more resources so that they can even work better. They are already doing a great job, which could be better. And mainly, we have the feeling that the results, the conclusions of their work is not always well followed up by the justice institution and mainly by the prosecution service. So there is certainly a need for better cooperation between Hidachi and the prosecution service. And we really hope that the newly established SPAC, the Special Prosecutors Against Corruption, will help improving this system so that once again the controls which are done by Hidachi can result in also sanctions when it is necessary.
Was SPAC part of your evaluation? Were you able to discuss and talk with them and see the performance they are already doing?
Actually, when we were in the course of preparing the report, SPAC existed on the paper, not yet really physically. Now we know that the first important step have been done so that SPAC is given a real life. So we can only encourage now the institution to start functioning and really proving to the population that the justice power now, including the prosecution services also, are really willing to fight corruption, and the proper functioning of SPAC will be a very good indicator of this willingness. It was not possible for us really to evaluate it because it was not functioning when we have done the report, but we know that now the institution is in place, and we can just encourage them to work properly.
So this report reflects the situation until when? Until what period?
The report, the evaluation visit of the team was in November 19. Because of the sanitary crisis, it was a little bit delayed. Obviously, everybody will understand it. So there is a kind of gap between the visit and the issue of the report. But we have tried to take into account all the elements given by the Albanian authorities until last summer, actually.
And the last question is about the police, Mr. Lemberger. You talk about the police in the report quite a lot, actually. And there are concerns regarding the appointment of the medium level of the director. They should be appointed by the head of police and not by the interior ministers. Did you have any specific concern in that matter?
Yes, indeed. Generally speaking, the report and GRECO really push the Albanian authorities to go more in depth as regards the depolitization of the police, and so that the high and medium level of police officers do not depend so much on the political circumstances, but are really working in the long term. So that therefore it is recommended, among other recommendations, that the middle management of the police is not appointed politically by the Minister of the Interior, but rather by the director, the general director of the police, which will be again a signal of this depolitization of the police in Albania.
The report also mentions the donation to the police departments, that it is somehow problematic. Do you have a problem on the transparency? Who are the donators? And indeed, the reasons behind this donation?
Yes, indeed, the evaluation team was a little bit surprised to notice that it was possible for the police to receive donations. This is not so common in the other European states. It is not for us to say that these donations cannot take place, but that at least they are framed with stricter rules to make it sure that obviously there is no possibilities of corruption through such donations. So there are clearer rules to be established if the Albanian police wants to continue receiving such donations.
And a final question, if you can make an assessment on the work of the police fighting corruption, are you satisfied with it?
I think there is also a lot of improvements to be noticed as in this regard. There is still also some work to be done. I think that for the time being, we had the feeling, but that's only a feeling among the population, that they are trusting more and more the low-level police, the police at yet the lowest level, but they still have a lot of doubt about the full integrity of the high-ranking police officers. So there is also a lot of work to be done to give really all the guarantees that the police work with a high level of integrity and a high level of transparency. But I think that with the recommendations that have been made by GRECO, there is also a possibility to improve.
Thank you very much for this interview from Strasbourg to Euronews Albania, Mr. Stefan Leyenberger.
Faleminderit shumë.
Faleminderit juve, ndërkohë ne këtu kemi përfunduar. Për sot, siç e pat edhe nga intervista me autorin e raportit të GRECO-s, duhet që shqiptarëve t'u jepet mundësia të krijojnë më shumë besim tek institucionet, jo tek individët, dhe sigurisht individët duhet të sigurohen që të ndërtohet ky besim tek institucionet me më shumë transparencë, llogaridhënie dhe luftë korrupsionit. Faleminderit për vëmendjen tuaj. Bashkë takohemi të hënën.